Welcome to a very special edition of Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative editor-in-chief. To my right, your left at home. No, it's not our pop culture connoisseur. He is here, though, but we have a special guest joining us from Nerd Initiative Wrestling and the Nerd Initiative Comics Bullpen. It's the one and only Rich.
That's right. I am a man of many hats, even though the hat currently says Nerd Initiative, but it's still many hats. And I am very honored to be here. This is awesome. Right up my alley. I like horror stuff as well, so we're good. And I can't wait to chat. But we got one final guy to talk about here in the room.
Yes, we do. And because it's in his own contract, he has to do his own intro.
And I do live and direct straight from the ODPH studios. My name's Off the Cuff Tom, Nerd Dishes pop culture connoisseur. Chris, Keith, Rich, Ken, always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And we have a special book to talk about because, like we say, when it's a special edition, you know we have something we're all excited about here at Nerd Initiative that we want you to find out about. And especially, time is running out to make sure you order this book on Kickstarter. April 8th is the cutoff date. And if you want to find out about a story that poses the question, what if the world ended and no one could hear it? And you like your apocalyptic horror, psychological thriller, all rolled into one, Frost Road is the book you need to have. Now, we could talk about it all day, but we're fortunate enough to have a few guests on that know about it just a little more than we do. First off, welcoming the creative director and president of PCB Productions, writer of the Exiled with Wesley Snipes and Ascend. Please give a welcome to KEITH AREM. Keith, what's going on?
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me today. It's super cool to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming by. And joining him is the director of special projects and outreach at PCB Productions, CHRIS Yates. Chris, what is going on?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having us. By the way, that was a fantastic intro. Like hats off, gentlemen. That was very well done. Super impressed.
Thank you. We try here, but we try containing the excitement too. But there's a lot to be excited about with this project. So I'll pose this to Keith first. And Chris, you can jump in too about this one. How did this whole project come to be?
That's a loaded question.
That's why we're doing this.
So for people who know my background, I've been in the game industry for quite a long time. I started in music and film and television and animation, but comics and graphic novels were always a part of my blood. And the first graphic novel that I started with was a book called Ascend years ago with Christopher Shai, and it became the top-selling book with Image Comics and kind of blew up. And at the time, I didn't know much about creating comics. I just knew that I had this kind of epic giant story. I didn't know any other way to tell it other than painting it up as a graphic novel with Christopher. So now coming kind of full circle, working, producing, directing, and writing all these projects in all these different mediums, this was kind of a logical step for my career in terms of directing movies and other things. So Frost Road started off as actually a screenplay that I was writing, and I was doing storyboards for the film with Trevor Goring, who was working on Watchmen and X-Men and a lot of other great motion pictures for Warner Brothers. And it was just a great story, and I wanted to do animatics and do conceptual artwork. So I went back to Christopher Shai that I had had a great relationship with, and we'd been doing a lot of projects together. So he started painting up a lot of Trevor's boards, and that was really the beginning of what this book was. And then for a variety of different reasons, we had a tragedy at our studios, and then COVID and all these things kind of stopped everything, stopped the film deal, stopped everything from going forward. So we just came back together, and Exile did really well with us last year with Wesley. And we decided, let's just take control of our own destiny and get this out as a graphic novel and produce it ourselves and do it through Kickstarter and build our community that way. And it's just been amazing just to see where Hollywood's at and the game industry and everything coming together. And now creators have even a better platform than they've ever had in doing stuff like this with Kickstarter.
No, that's incredible. And like I say, I think as soon as fans find out about this, this is going to be something they're going to really gravitate to. So
Yeah, well, Ken kind of gave a little teaser at the beginning, a little taste of kind of what the book is about. But let's do a little deeper dive without giving too much away, because obviously we want to keep people intrigued. Can you let everybody know kind of like the framework, if you will, of the story?
Chris, go for it, man. You got this.
Yeah. So we usually like to to kind of describe it as a zombie movie in reverse, because as you know, the typical kind of zombie things with Walking Dead and The Last of Us and things like that, but we do it more in a science based, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want to give it away. But basically, there's this town of Frost Road where this gentleman wakes up, and it's very much like a video game where he doesn't like really recognize, who he is or what he's done or what's going on, and then you kind of go through this, hero's journey, if you will, into this town, and you figure out like what's happening, and just basically it's this psychological thriller that's very much unsettling with dread and kind of horror, and basically you start to realize what's actually been happening to this town, and it's a lot of fun, and it's definitely playing into those kind of strengths of you see in The Quiet Place and Silent Hill and stuff like that. So
And the reason we kind of refer to it as like a zombie movie in reverse is mainly because the characters, any of the survivors who are kind of going through what's ever happening to this town, they don't know why either they're immune to it or what's happening to it or why they're being attacked by these sort of invisible waves or whatever is affecting the town. And so they slowly don't trust each other, much less themselves. And with our main character having this sort of amnesia from this car crash, he doesn't even realize sort of the part that he plays in it. So he has to end up protecting these people from themselves because whatever's affecting the town is still causing these people to rip themselves apart. So we didn't want to do like a traditional zombie movie where it's just hordes of zombies attacking people in survival horror in that sense. This was more about the psychology of the characters and this really great ensemble cast of everyone kind of trying to escape the town of Frost Road, and the town is very much a character in that. So that's why we talk about Silent Hill and Resident Evil and other video games that we've worked on, because it's very much in the same kind of worlds, but on a much different sort of level.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. It's definitely a great comparison with those worlds. And also, like artistically, it is also like when you look at the art of the piece as well, it kind of has that it's an amazing, unique style, and it's beautiful. And at the same time, it kind of gives you that vibe of that kind of lost kind of world air. You know what I mean? Like I lack a better term, like an eerie dream world, if you will, kind of Silent Hill-esque with, they only use smoke and everything. But yeah, I think that's definitely, I can't gush enough. And I also don't want to give up too much of what I've read, because I'm not spoiling anything. I promise.
Yes.
And that artwork was really important too, because Christopher's artwork, even though Trevor's boards were phenomenal and they're amazing for the motion picture that we have planned, but for the book, Christopher's artwork has this like surreal, dreamlike, painterly quality. But at the same time, we were using a lot of reference artwork. We weren't repurposing photographs, but what we were doing was taking photographs of a lot of celebrity actors or friends that could help us pose to keep the characters sort of on reference model. And then Christopher Shy, who was kind of known for this style, he was now taking these really photorealistic sort of reference images and worlds and juxtaposing that with this nightmarish kind of quality that he does. And it's a cool style because it looks cinematic. It looks like you're stepping into a movie or something to that effect. And every panel, the thing I love most about Christopher's work is that every single panel is like a cover. It literally, you could take any panel from anywhere in the book and it's like, oh, that could be the cover of the book. And I love just diving into books like that. So I'm a big fan of Christopher's work, and the fact that we collaborate so much, it's kind of neat to see the story evolve that way, because you're kind of telling the story in real time and it comes to life through the artwork, and it's a fun experience.
Now, perfect that you said this, Keith, that you've worked with Christopher in the past on Ascend. How has this process been this time around? Have there been any major differences in your creative process from the first time to now?
Chris and I are like long lost brothers, and Chris Yates and I are now long lost brothers. But Christopher, like it's amazing. We have so many projects we're working on together because we have so many ideas. And Christopher is an amazing writer and author and creator in his own right. And even though people know him for all the projects he's done for Coheed and Cambria, and he did the Dead Space graphic novels and the stuff for Godzilla, so people recognize his work because it's just so iconic. But at the same time, Chris and I will just. It's really funny when we have conversations. You don't have a short conversation together. We're on the phone for 3, 4, or 5 hours together. We're just like, we talk about everything. We get along. Our families, our kids are the same age and grew up together. And so Chris and I, like when we're collaborating, it's really getting into the psychology of the characters, the world, our references. We love the same movies, all the same horror things that we had growing up, or all the same references. And And so if I geek out about The Thing and I start referencing something from John Carpenter's The Thing, he'll go off and start talking about McCready and this and how Childs was this way, and we'll just spiral into our cultural references, which work their way back into our stories. I think the difference on this one was that we had this little thing called COVID in the middle of it, and it's weird how a global pandemic will kind of screw up your normal creative process. But, he lives on the East Coast and I'm out on the West Coast. So we were always used to working remotely anyway. So it really didn't change the way we work. And he works at home and I work out of our studios in LA. So it was actually kind of nice working on this because we could have more conversations and not have the pressure and distraction of all of our other clients and other work. And it did take a little bit longer, I would say, than to do a normal project. I mean, Ascend took us about 2.5 years, and this one, wow, from script to now this book has been almost 10. And that's not the speed of us how we work, but it's just life and other things getting in the way. So it was a little weird kind of taking a story where we had started on it so long ago and then came full circle, and that allowed us to I think spend more time on the story and the art and refine things and go back. And in fact, just in COVID, we brought in CHRIS YATES and Edo Ross and a few other actors to help us with more of our photo reference, even though Christopher had already been painting them. And then Yuri Lowenthal, who's a really close friend of mine, had been posing for the main character, Chris. And it's even funny to see the progression of Yuri over this because we photographed him initially so long ago, and now to have him there, I'm like, and I'm doing a show with Yuri next week in Arizona for a con, and it's kind of funny because I don't want people to think like, "Whoa, are you trying to de-age him or something like that?" And it's just, it's funny. We just love working on these projects for so long, and sometimes it just takes a little while to get out there.
And for those playing at home, that's 4 Chris's on one project.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's Christopher Shy, the artist, then there's me, the kind of director of outreach, and then there's CHRIS YATES, who's an actor, and then the main character that Yuri does photo reference for is Chris Williams. So in case there's any confusion, happy to clarify.
Just Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, because I was sitting there trying to like keep everybody track in my head there. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of Chris's on this, but hey, it doesn't matter as long as the quality is standing out.
We could just have named the book Chrisapalooza. Maybe there you go. There you go. But there is some partnerships on this as well. For this project, you partnered with Dead Meat. For anybody who's not in the, doesn't pay attention to horror, very respected in the horror world, very successful YouTube channel and podcast. Biggest thing, of course, being the kill count. So very well known and very well respected. Knowing their impact with the horror world, with this being a horror project, was there any extra pressure on the project with that, or how did that come to be?
This has been the most organic, amazing relationship with James and Chelsea. When we got introduced to them through a mutual, one of our attorneys had introduced us, who also is very tied into the music world as where my background was, and that's how we kind of got tied into this. Chelsea and James not only are the sweetest people, and I happen to live right down the street from my studios, but Chelsea was getting into voice acting and started taking classes with us because we also teach a lot of technical acting for video games. And Chelsea's immediately getting cast on a lot of the big games that we're directing. And so we just had this really organic relationship of just all being people that love working in the industry, and the fact that we also have a love of horror and all the other backgrounds in our own respective audiences that we work in. We're like, hey, let's start doing stuff together. And they wanted to move more into narrative and original projects. And definitely their audience is just such an amazing group of people that supports them and follows them. So this was kind of just a very organic, like, hey, do you guys want to do this? And like, yeah. And then it's just been growing and growing. So we introduced it as a stretch goal for Frost. So we're on our way to funding already. But if we do get into our next stretch goal, we're going to be developing a audio drama series, kind of like a motion comic and audio drama with Dead Meat. And hopefully we'll do an entire series of audio dramas together in the future and have them perform and do other things. There are writers involved and other stories and anthology stories. So it's not just Frost Road or any one story, but we kind of use our relationship and our background and our studios and friends in the industry and talent to develop kind of new media that's kind of goes between our comic books and our video games and our movies and everything in between.
No, it's excellent.
Now, you're talking about, you have all these wonderful references, and obviously Yuri Lowenthal, if anybody's watched a cartoon in the past, 2 decades, you know who we're talking about. You know, Ben 10, Sasuke Uchiha, Spider-Man. I mean, you know who he is. Now you said that he's a friend of yours, but how much coaxing did it really take to put him on the panel pages? And did we get the eyes right? Because come on, let's be honest, he got them eyes. He does. He's got very pretty eyes.
He's got amazing. I mean, the best part about Yuri's eyes in particular is that he can tell a whole story with his eyes, and that's what I love about him. And like, just that's why I really wanted to cast him as this role and be able to have him portray that. And it's interesting because I've done so many projects with him, dating all the way back to Prince of Persia, and that's actually how I met him. And so we've always been longtime friends. We actually share the same birthday. Him and his wife Tara are godparents to my children. So we've been very, very close for many, many years. And but I just admire Yuri as a performer, not just as a voice actor, but just that, like you said, like with those eyes, it's just got this piercing look that can sort of convey all the emotion I need for a scene. And for a graphic novel in particular, your sequential artwork is really very special. You have to be able to tell a story in a very limited amount of panels. And even though the screenplay was only about 100 pages, this book is 252 pages. So to paint sequentially, you really need a lot of real estate. And so what I did with Yuri is I said, not only did I want the photo reference, but we got him into costume. We went on location. We went to, for about 3 days, we went around and I had like a high def camera and we would just record small scenes. We had some of the blocking from Trevor Goring. We kind of knew where the scenes needed to go, where our eye lines were going to be, what the action was going to be. And so I would let Yuri sort of perform as if it was an on-camera performance. And we'd light it drastically, or if it was on location, we'd have some kind of environment that was similar to what we wanted in the book. We'd take that, I would extract frames from that. So I sort of had the framing, and that's what I would give along with the panels to Christopher, and then let Christopher do his magic. And I think it really does translate. And if you see the initial artwork that we've released, and obviously the whole book's finished, it's pretty powerful. And Yuri is just like the best character for that role.
And that's the prime example, ladies and gentlemen. Voice actors are also and still actors.
All facts with that.
All facts.
And especially when fans see this on Kickstarter, we're now seeing a lot more movement in the business for books going to Kickstarter. So obviously both of you have had history with the comic business. Why do you think Kickstarter is such a draw for fans to be invested with, like with projects like this?
I think basically it's probably the most purest idea, probably, because it's like, hey, I have this idea. I have either, if that person's an artist themselves or a partner or a team, it could be the most like pure thing possible. Yes, you want to make sure that they have kind of, a resume behind it, but it's just a very simple way of like, I want to make this thing and I think it's of quality and I want to put it out in the world, and this is an opportunity to do so. And plus you can have ownership of that IP. I mean, I came from UTA, which is United Talent Agency, and Disney, and my specialty was in media rights. And basically you would try to option those rights for these books. And if your book was at a different company or a publisher, like generally speaking, they would take a portion of that and you'd be kind of out of it and you wouldn't have the say in all that. So with the explosion of like, all these optionings, whether it be with James Tynion or Invincible and the Skybounds and all those things, like it's up to it only helps you to own that. You know what I mean? Like you can be like, hey, I don't want to, like, if you're lucky to first get an option, that's a wonderful thing. But then to be like, I want to do it with this person. And if you're lucky, then you have that say. And so I guess that whole windfall is in your favor. And I know that's a very, high, like, you're shooting for the sky, but at the same time, that is like the biggest thing is like everything's on you, good or bad. Like you're in it for the profits as a team or as a creator, and you're also in it for any type of press and work and all that stuff. So I think to kind of answer it is just, I think fans can see the most pure thing possible. I don't know, Keith, what do you think?
Well, I think as a creator, your job as you're perceived is to create and not to understand the business and not to understand really kind of what the economics are, but it is a business. And at the end of the day, we all want to pay our rent and support ourselves by doing
Right.
what we love to do. And I think that the publishing business, especially for comics, not to say that larger publishers, but the way that comic books and distribution has worked over the years is really broken. And as evidenced with happened with Diamond and the way that creators have participated in their books, I feel is really, unfortunately, not very fair to the creators.
Mm.
And so as a result, most creators, if they try to stand up for themselves or they try to get a better deal, you come across as like a diva, like you're being too difficult because you're asking for something and you should just stay in your lane and do your art. But if those same negotiations or agreements were negotiated by an attorney or an agent or a manager, people would say, "Oh, that's good business. They've got great representation." And I think that Kickstarter kind of equalizes all of that, because what they kind of talk to creators about when you're considering doing a Kickstarter is only ask for what you need, not what you want or where you'd like to go. Just ask for what you need. And what's interesting is that that really tells a lot about where the creators are as business people and also physically or economically what they need. In a case like ours, we're looking to, we have a finished book. We're trying to get it out to our fans. So we're really looking for fulfillment and shipping and printing costs. And we're doing these beautiful, the artwork is beautiful. So we want the packaging and the just the printing to be equally great for the audience. So this is a coffee table book. This is something that you want to own and collect and not just have hidden on a shelf somewhere. This is something that should be out, to share with your friends and that takes just a lot of time and planning and effort and money. And I think that Kickstarter really now is equalizing that for creators like us to go out directly to our fans and saying, it's not an investment. This is, in a sense, you investing in us and yourself to get something that you're not going to find anywhere else. And those creators now can support themselves, hopefully, to be able to do the next one and then kind of encourage a positive cycle of creators creating more content that people love.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
this is and this is what I get for having Keith go after me, because he has a much more eloquent answer than I ever do. I try to say something nice, and he just like blows me out of the water. So
vote with your money. Just vote with your money. That's the short answer. There it is.
no, but that's exactly perfect way to put it, because with Kickstarter really giving that one-on-one connection, especially with creators, and it takes away the middleman per se, but there's always those incentives to do it. And like, it's not just, hey, buy this book because reasons. You're actually giving them a lot. And especially on the stretch goals you have here, which would you say is the one that is like the automatic, like when you were both coming up with ideas for stretch goals, like which is the one that you're like, wow, this would be something if I was a fan and like I was interested in this book, like this is the one I would go for.
I mean, I think our stretch goals are really interesting too, because people don't know Frost yet. They don't know Frost Road. They know us through all the work we've done and the projects we've been associated with. But it's not like I'm going to go out and, be as a fan, be super excited to get a T-shirt or a poster or some collectible something from a franchise that they don't know about. But they do know our work. So what we wanted to do was focus most of the tiers on the book itself, whether it's the hardcover or the slipcase cover, which is obviously which we're focused on. But the tiers were designed to allow the audience to sort of engage with us and kind of learn from our experience in the industry, because we have such an amazing team of people that have done so many of these top projects, not just from the acting world or from the video game or directing space, but writing, artwork, all these different sort of disciplines. So the tiers were kind of designed to not be super expensive, but also kind of equivalent to what we do when we teach. So a lot of us give back to the community, and we teach master classes, and we teach at USC or different schools where we can kind of share our work with other creators and other people who want to get into the industry. So we figured, rather than just doing some merchandise or something that people aren't going to really know about for us, why don't we give back in a chance to do a Q&A or a meet and greet or a master class or a portfolio review or something to that effect. So I think each of them kind of are escalating in a sense of how deep a dive you want to go. If you just want to have a Q&A session with us or watch us do a panel or something like that and ask questions, then we offer those. And those are kind of, very encouraging for a lot of people who want to get into the business. But we have some people that want to really get into the business and become executive producers or have a portfolio review or do something to that effect. So I don't know, Chris, I mean, from the tiers, it's kind of a new thing, I think, especially on Kickstarter, to see people kind of investing that way. But what do you think? Like, what do you think is the
I think for me personally, I would probably go with the mentorship because that's a genuine one-on-one like type
Mhm.
of interaction from someone who's been in the industry. Like if I don't know Keith and I'm just looking at this as a fan, it's like, well, he has this giant resume, this embarrassment of riches that he has. And it's like I would love to learn from him if I could, because then you could, whether it be specifically for comic books, video games, acting, or film, like honestly, anything in the entertainment space. I personally think that's the best value, but that's just me because I love to learn and to grow. And another reason why we kind of, not to derail it, but we thought of these types of tiers because of one thing, and that is shipping. We don't know how shipping's going to be in a
Right.
year from or 6 months from now or whatever because of tariffs and I mean the weight of the book. I mean, it's a big book, as Keith said, it's a coffee size table book.
Yeah.
So it could, depending if you get the acrylic like slipcase, you're looking at like maybe a 6 to 7 pound package coming to you, and then going from LA to Australia, like you're looking at like $100 potentially, and that's I mean that it is what it is, but we're trying our best to see like, okay, how can we add more value to people who want to take a chance and want to learn with us? And so that's why we're trying to offer more digital rewards. And even then, we're trying to find ways to kind of mitigate that. So, for example, for the international backers, Keith and Christopher Shy are going to be doing a book plate signing. So, anyone who's international or outside of the US or North America, we haven't really decided, but you're going to get a free signed book because we were trying to make it of value because we know how difficult it is. And it's a new IP. And so, we're just always thinking of how can we give back and make it just something worth someone's time and hard-earned money, because at the end of the day, like no one wants to be taken for a ride, and we're just
Right.
trying to do something new. So
And we also don't want to be egotistical and saying, "Hey, we're so great. We're these creators. You can learn from us." It's like it's more so. I think that we have a lot to share. We've been through everything, and if you look at kind of our history in particular, we've learned so much by making the mistakes that young creators don't want to necessarily go through. And the industry's changing, right? And we're seeing things like Kickstarter and new platforms coming out. So we're all adapting on our side, but you kind of learn from your history, and that's kind of what we have to share and kind of probably the best commodity. So the work speaks for itself, and we hope obviously the fans love the projects. But we have a whole slate of projects that we're going to be unveiling starting at San Diego Comic-Con this year, and the classes are kind of a nice bridge between what fans can get digitally, and like what Chris said, like we can mitigate the shipping costs. We love the physical side, and that's where the book can come in. But hopefully, we can give back through the mentorship and sharing what we know.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing deal too, because especially with so many creators that really don't know the ins and outs, to go off your experiences and have that one-on-one connection to really kind of get a path of where they should go. I mean, I don't want to say cliche, but it's priceless. But I mean, it's well worth the time of investment along with a great story.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's been getting a great response too. It's interesting because even on the Kickstarter, just we have I think about maybe 15 or 17 days to go, and we're starting to see now not only is the book getting traction, but now the classes, and people are asking about other things that we're doing, and we have conventions asking us to make appearances and do the same kind of ideas, maybe teach these same classes at the live appearances that we do, and other universities doing the same. So hopefully this becomes a trend for other creators, because there's a lot of people that inspired us to do this. Jimmy Palmiotti is a good friend of mine, and he's the one who got Ascend started back in the day, and he was the one who really was encouraging me to move forward with Kickstarter, and he's done a tremendous amount of
Mm.
titles, just self-publishing and going that direction. And I've worked with him professionally and personally on all these different projects. And so to learn from people like that and seeing other people starting to give back in the industry, I think hopefully this becomes a trend where other creators start to collaborate on a whole new level. And it's not that we're not trying to be reliant on the industry itself. We depend on it. It's just
Right.
that I think from a financial and distribution level, the gatekeepers are changing, and now the fans have direct access to the creators that they like.
Yeah, I think especially the digital age. I mean, there's more doors open now than there were 5, 10 years ago. I mean, it's just the way of how technology evolves, and especially how business evolves too. And I think to kind of mash that in with the campaign, I think is just such a smart move.
It's
Mhm.
cool.
Now, you keep saying, you guys have these wonderful varied backgrounds and everything that you're bringing to the table. When it comes to doing like the storyboards and everything, when you're thinking video game, you're thinking how to get from point A to point B, but also everything in between. Do you take that same idea, even though now on the panel pages everything is kind of static? Like, what's your whole thought process of How do I use the real estate, properly?
Yeah, games have really evolved. Speaking of that as an influence, obviously I've worked in different areas, but video games in particular have evolved in a really interesting way. Because look at like a old arcade game or something like that. You might have had a guy having to fight a zombie on a 2D side-scrolling game, right? And from a story perspective and from a camera perspective, you've got a guy and you see the zombie and you're fighting, the zombie dies, and that's kind of the end of the story, right?
Yeah.
But you had suddenly in Resident Evil, they moved the camera this way. And so now over your shoulder, you can't see if there's a zombie hiding behind a wall or some kind of threat that's there. And just by changing the camera perspective, changed the way the narrative worked. And I was really fascinated by that because in games, the camera is the player most of the time, right? And it depends on the game. You could have a real-time strategy game or a side-scrolling game or a third-person game or a first-person game, and that changes the narrative. So when you're talking about working on a graphic novel or a story like this that very much has, we talk about it like a video game sort of mentality in a sense that we open up with a character that has amnesia and a blank slate and we don't know who we are. And in fact, the first 10 pages of the dialogue, other than some inner monologue, there's no dialogue in the book itself. So that very much kind of follows the same path of how a lot of video games will evolve, where you have a character that you have to identify with and go through the story. And that's a really interesting way how we start to approach how we tell stories like this, because the composition, when we're talking to other characters, are we sympathizing or putting ourselves in the place of the main character the way we do in a video game? Or are we just watching it like a movie? And I think in Frost, it was like a combination of that, of being there as this guy and then starting to evolve back and then bring in the cast and start to realize that we might not trust the main character and maybe we don't trust each other and we don't trust everybody else. And so the influence from a visual standpoint and a storytelling standpoint very much comes from our love of games. The interesting thing in games is that a lot of times a game isn't on rails the way an old school game might have been.
Right.
An old school game is you are going from A to B to C, like a Disneyland ride, and you're going on rails and you're experiencing things around, but you're very much on a track. But now as you're seeing, even if there's destinations to get to in a large game, it's an open world and you can go around a lot of games now and you don't have those rails anymore. And so I think that's the real interesting part is I think audiences like the rails to some extent. They want to know where the story's going or have some familiar aspects to relate to the characters. But at the same time, I think the audience wants more agency the way we do in video games and kind of change the way we experience things. And I think that's why we're kind of giving back in so many different ways in audio drama or developing a film or doing something else in addition to the book allows us to explore it in different aspects. And while the book is on rails to an extent, you're turning the pages and you're progressing the story as you go through it, it's still going to end the same way, unfortunately. But I think that's going to change in the future. And that's why I think those of us who work in video games kind of like this opportunity to tell a narrative, but then open up the world that, hey, maybe it could be different. And that's how we kind of explore a lot of these stories like this.
No, you can definitely tell that, and especially like doing a journey like this. Has there been anything that you both have thought have given you a different perspective on storytelling with the completion of this book?
Chris, you want to? What is your thing? Chris and I had started on this in December, so the book was already together at that point. And Chris is an amazing author in his own right, and he's got a story that he's been producing that's awesome, and that's a whole nother show coming up after this. But it's nice to have feedback between creators on the team because all of us, our storyboards and artists and everybody else. But Chris, what's kind of your feeling? Because you came into this at a different perspective than I did.
Well, I think that it was so. To kind of give you context, me and Keith met of December of last year. So that was the first time we had ever met. And then basically we just kind of kept in touch. And I was just like, dude, you have so many things you can do. And then, why don't we do this? And he's like, let's do Kickstarter. And so basically the whole thing, as he said earlier, was Frost Road 10 years. It was like, we need to get this out. And so to work on this project and be like, how do we do this? Like, how do we actually start a plan? And so we started, I reached out to Sam at Kickstarter and he's been wonderful. And we're like, okay, so he's like, you're going to start in March. That'd probably be your best bet because statistically in Kickstarter, for those that don't know, they've done really well in March for some reason. So we're like, okay, cool. We'll plan for that. And then February is going to be like our entire month of planning. Let's, figure out all the interviews, all the press and blah, blah, blah. And then Keith gets double pneumonia.
Yeah.
And then
Like you do.
basically cuts out an entire month of planning. And so everything that we've done has been almost like a month's work into like a week. And so it's basically just like, hey, let's get this whole narrative out there as best we can. Because at the end of the day, like we're still learning. We're still trying to do this the best we can. So I think for me and what I've learned in this experience is just like it's rather gratifying to just put all this work and to see things. Like there's some days on the Kickstarter where, it doesn't make as much money and that's kind of a bummer. But then there's some days like last night where you get like $800 just out of nowhere, or you get like a huge splurge. Someone donates $3,000 and wants to be a part of your campaign. And you're like, that's insane. Like, who is this person? Like, but they're there and they're there to support. So I think for me, again, to kind of come back to your question is, I think just the whole of just doing the work and putting the work and having faith that it's going to work, even though there's going to be points during the campaign where it's going to be a bit of a sludge fest, or it may plateau. You just got to keep working through it and kind of getting back up, as they say, and just never giving up. I guess for a cliche answer, but what do you think, Keith?
Well, I think also that Kickstarter itself as an identity, it's kind of fun that it's like it's kind of a noun and a verb and all sorts of things all mixed in one. It's almost like, when you refer to a Kickstarter, it's a thing, right? And it's not just a company. And so when you decide you're going to do that, unless you've done them before, the audience doesn't know who you are. So I think that the history of Kickstarter of people like saying, well, what if it doesn't fund? And I have to have an account and then I have to put in money to do this. And what if it doesn't get there? And what if they don't fulfill? And I think there's a lot of questions for the audience. And so there's a little bit of education for the fans who don't follow Kickstarter or haven't backed a project before. And I think that changes your relationship as a creator because this is an amazing opportunity for us to talk to you guys and to talk through your audiences to get to know us. So then the next one becomes bigger and they know what you're there and you're going to be reliable and you ship your books and you ship them on time and, you do these things. But I think all those questions that a lot of people have are kind of lingering, and that kind of gets in the way of being a creator and thinking about what's best for the story. And, a lot of times you have to take this field of dreams approach that it's like, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we're doing this with or without them. Hopefully, the audience will back us. And I think that, there's some people who back Indiegogo and other types of crowdfunding things like Legion M. And I think that you're just seeing more and more of this coming. Like you said earlier, it's like you're finding creators and other people turning to crowdfunding because the creators really want to have a little bit more control and input of not only their work, but also this relationship through the audience and through social media and being able to tell stories in a new way. And I think, we love Hollywood. We all love to have a movie deal or, anything else that's there, but it's more important that we kind of do it on our own terms. And that's what you're seeing through these campaigns.
Yeah, I really think that's a point too, because especially when you're so passionate about a project and it's more like the intimate feel, like, this is my creation, I want to put it out to the world. That's where it really comes with the ups and downs about the campaign and really just getting out there and putting it out there. And especially like how you hit upon too. If anybody doesn't know you, you're talking to a brand new market that somebody might not put one and one together. So you have to make that first impression. The one thing that we've seen here amongst the countless creators that we've had to do Kickstarters is just the word of mouth about books. And just after that first book, like that campaign, whether it's a smash success or a moderate success, as long as there's something that comes out, that's usually what starts the ball rolling. And I really think that fans are going to gravitate towards this because they're really going to see something they haven't seen before too. And even to piggyback off something you said, I think you see that spike in March because everybody is starting to get early tax money back.
Right.
And they've also broken up in Valentine's.
Right.
So we got
That too,
extra money.
yeah. It's like
Right.
the double one, the double
They've
combo.
used all their Christmas presents.
Yes.
Yeah. No, and it's an interesting time also because I think a lot of creators are realizing that they can experiment and tell different stories and get to different audiences. But they do need that assurance, that they are going to do the work. And you see it how people price their campaigns. Like some people ask for $500 or $1,000, and I think that also speaks a little bit about the size of the campaign and what their ambitions are. And so they, like what I was saying earlier, you kind of ask for what you need, and if you're sizing, your campaign towards where your goal is, you can start to look at these creators and what their goals are and how that business is, and hopefully, it's sustainable for a lot of creators to be able to get to those audiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So besides being fans, what is the biggest draw to create something in the horror genre?
Man, that's a loaded question. I mean, we all grew up loving horror. I mean, and there's a difference between blood, guts horror and psychological horror as well. When my daughter started getting into horror films at a young age, I wouldn't let her see films like The Shining, and she didn't understand. She goes, "Well, why can't I see it? Is it so bloody or whatever?" I said, "It has nothing to do with the blood. I mean, sure, there's if you know Hollywood or anything like that, it has nothing to do with the blood." I try to explain to her, I said, if you've ever had a dream that's ever kept you up at night where you can't sleep, that's psychological horror. And so I look back at the things that influenced me, and while I loved films like Alien and The Thing and American Werewolf in London and all these like classic sort of foundational horror films that kind of evolved into modern day horror, there's a difference between that and then if you see stuff like The Terrifier and other things, they have an equally cool, amazing, fun audience, but for different reasons. If you look at Final Destination or you look at anything that's in modern horror now, there's a difference, and it's kind of a cultural statement of who we are and what makes us scared. Because a movie like Alien or Halloween, those are like stalker films. They're slow burn movies. They're really slow. And when something happens, it's amazing how jarring that is. And some audiences nowadays want instant gratification, or they're going for, something like the quick blood splat. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. And I think, it has its place. But I also love the idea of just that psychological horror and not knowing what's around the corner, because your brain is going to fill in more than anything you can see. That's what makes Alien so scary for me. It's like you don't even see it half the time. And that's what made Jaws work, back in the day, maybe for technical reasons, but it's still very effective because our brain is going to say that's infinitely more scary than what your eyes are going to tell you. So that's what brings me into the horror space.
Less is sometimes more. Definitely.
Yeah.
Unless I'm talking, then I'm just talking.
I think just to kind of, I'll put a little bow on it, is I think it's what you can learn from it too, and all the kind of psychology. Whether like back in the day, it was usually a warning of like, hey, this is like, you don't do this because this will happen. And I think you can experience all this visceral reaction, whether it be physical or mental. You feel something with horror, or you can explore something with horror. I mean, yes, you can do that with all narrative, but I think it shows in today's society the most is like horror is the only film, as I know, I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, that's actually still making money in theaters. Like it's people go and they go out to the movie theaters and they feel it. It's an experience. It's a communal experience, or it's a singular experience, depending if you're on your phone or you're this, but it's just one of those things where you're going to hopefully feel something. And that's why people gravitate towards it. And that's what I love. You can explore psychology and all these things, as Keith said. And so I'm a huge fan of The Fly. I think that's probably my favorite horror film because of that. And then like that kind of also goes into The Substance, was the whole like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which then is like absolute power corrupts absolutely, all that thing. So I think it's just as much of a mental learning experience as it is like a physical reaction that you get through these things. So I think that's why I probably love it the most.
I think that basically horror, as a horror fan, horror is like a smorgasbord of whatever you want to make it. So
Yeah.
you can actually you can tell a story, and it also ticks in something that is primal in all of us, because fear is primal in all of us. And I think that that's what draws people to what they're uncomfortable and scared of. And that's why you have so many different reactions. Somebody could tell you that The Exorcist is the scariest movie ever made, and other people will just be like, well, it's a great movie, but it wasn't scary. The same way as, I always like to make a joke about one of my best friends. He's terrified of clowns. When you say that to people, most people go, oh, he saw the movie It. No, he's terrified of clowns because he watched, what is it?
Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Killer Clowns from Outer
One of my
Space.
favorites. Yeah. So mind you, that is,
I scarred my daughter with that one. Yeah.
And much like you, I just wanted to say, Keith, I also I have a 19-year-old son now. When he was younger and he was first getting into horror, I definitely curated his journey through. A lot of it I cut out because of sex. Obviously, I didn't mind the blood as much because and then definitely the psychological stuff. I didn't want him watching things that were gonna just scare him for the sake of scaring him. So he became a big Friday the 13th fan
Right.
in the beginning, and now he's watching everything. Like he watches things that like I took him to see a couple years ago. Now I think it was a couple years. Late Night with the Devil, and I was
Mhm.
really impressed that he
David,
got
yeah,
that.
David Dismulsion.
Yeah, because that was a more of a higher level movie, like as far as this, and when the fact that the kid that I got started watching horror movies was a lot of slasher films, a lot of zombie films, because they're a little safer in some avenues. Yes, they have gore, but they're not going to terrify you at the end of the night. Keep you up at night, as you pointed out. To go and have that proud moment where I'm like, wow, he gets this high level as well, because Late Night with the Devil was a super high level film on
And
top of just being scary.
well, totally. And so many things are like inspired by other things or influenced by other things. And so if you don't understand those cultural references, then to a newer audience, they think that's an original thought and they may like it or not. But like in it, when you saw the head grow legs and he's like, you gotta be, effing kidding me. Like that's a line right out of John Carpenter's The
Yep.
Thing. And why, sure, audiences might have been terrified and like, oh, that's crazy. If they didn't know that was from The Thing, they're just taking it at face value and saying, "Oh, that's freaking scary," and then they move on. So what I saw in my daughter when she got into this very young, and I did expose her to, I thought, "Oh, it's the Kyoto Brothers, and it's what could go wrong with killer clowns in outer space?" I loved this as a kid, and I showed it to her, and it totally messed her up and scared her. But in a point where she started watching a lot of horror stuff, and she started watching just random weird stuff that were all derivatives of classic horror. And I saw what she was watching, and I'm like, look, there's nothing wrong with you doing this, except for the fact is that you are not appreciating it for what it is, and you don't understand that that's a cultural reference, and they're referring to that, and this is where it comes from. And so, but this generation also grew up on short attention span theater where you've got YouTube and small bite size, content. And so it's really hard to bring someone of this generation into, a dark theater for 90 minutes with no social media, no email, no text, no nothing, just literally just watching
Right.
one linear show. And so I think as a result, the movie industry has been on the decline for a long time because streaming and other things. But I think it's just this mentality that most people don't have the patience for that. And so what I did is when the ArcLight Theater was still around, just before COVID, I had taken my daughter to a remastered screening of John Carpenter's The Thing. And I got her front row seats. There's no phone, there's no cell, there's nothing in the theater. She's just watching this thing for 90 minutes and uninterrupted. And it was amazing. At the end of that movie, she turned to me and she goes, "Dad, I understand it. I get it now. I understand what you're saying." And then she went back and went to every single classic movie, watched them. And now when she sees Black Mirror doing a werewolf episode, she sees like, oh, okay, that's a cultural reference back to American Werewolf in London. And that's why it makes it so special, because you can appreciate the heritage of horror, of classic horror, and why we're influenced that way, as opposed to just being a derivative and ripping something off. And I love that, the fact that we're now coming full circle with a whole generation of people like myself and you, and now our next generation of kids can get that influence and appreciate it and hopefully pass it on to the next one to keep the horror genre, going strong.
And of course, now they'll have the never-ending debate of who is the thing at the end of the movie. Is it Childs or is it McCready?
Right, right. It's funny is that I'm really good friends with Keith David, and he was telling me when they were shooting that, it was his first film. He was like 23, 25 years old, and he went out driving. He was really nervous, and he ended up crashing his car the night before filming.
Ooh.
And he shows up on set, and his arm is all casted up, and John Carpenter was furious. And so if you notice in that film, you'll never see his right arm because they shot around it, so you don't see his cast throughout the film. And it's amazing now to work with all these people and all these classic films that I grew up with and hear the stories of how they made the films and all the fun things behind the scenes behind that. So it's not just a creator of just doing this, but appreciating it, being a fan and understanding that the heritage is there with all the people we get to work with.
So speaking of all these great classic films, and what are, let's just throw them out there, your top three horror films?
Chris, you go first, man.
So, I mean, I already gave mine away. Mine's The Fly, like hands down. I think the Jeff Goldblum was just like that is peak Goldblum at his best, in my opinion. I think it was just everything for me in terms of the '80s, the movies, like the cinema, everything. Outside of that, like I don't know, like I don't really have like I one I can. I mean, obviously I love the first one, not the second one. Part two, that is. Part two is not for me, but part one was definitely amazing. I mean, all the classics. I mean, I also love like the more gothic stuff that's not necessarily like typical horror. Like I love The Crow. I mean, that's kind of more gothic than it is
Mhm.
horror. Um, I don't know. I'm just a big fan, like truthfully, just of the genre in itself. The Fly is 100% hands down, like my one I point to. I did love the Halloween remake, the first one. I thought that was really well done. I thought it built up the tension and it was great. But then the second and third one, I was just like, you guys lost me. It just felt like a completely different team had made it, and no shade to them, but it felt like a whole nother thing. I don't know.
Agreed.
So
I will agree to disagree. Pete Goldblum is definitely sure open in Jurassic Park. Let's be honest.
fair.
Yep,
Okay,
there you
that's
go.
all.
There you go.
But then
But
also, someone could say Jurassic Park is also a horror movie too. Because as a
Classic.
Yes.
kid, I was scared to hell about that thing. You're just seeing like that. No,
He
but
is.
yes,
Keith?
I mean, for me, so I grew up. My dad was a huge sci-fi fan, and I was reading and following all the books that my dad was doing. So Dune, and so when Star Wars came out, I was a big Star Wars nerd. And so along came this little film called Alien, and it was like, oh, it's sci-fi and it's scary, and I'm 10 years old, and sure, like I can handle horror and that kind of stuff. So I talked my parents into taking me to see Alien in the theater, and that's back then when theaters were like four times the size they are now, and this is 70 millimeter. And so unbelievable sound, super loud, giant theater, no one in the theater, and just there in the darkness. And that movie to this day has messed me up because I was just not emotionally equipped to deal with the film. I mean, even right now, I feel that film still holds up, and not just the performances, but even some of the practical effects and everything about that film I thought was so amazing. And even though it was pretty early in Ridley's career, it was just so impactful for me because I went in thinking it's going to be a Star Wars sci-fi thing. And I just remember watching the chestburster scene in the theater. And there was only probably about a dozen other people in the theater that day. And there was a couple in front of us. And I was so emotionally ill-equipped to deal with that, that the only thing that would come out of my mouth was laughter. Now, if you're this couple in this theater and there's this like 10-year-old kid and you're watching the most, arguably one of the most gruesome, horrific childbirthing scenes of an alien ripping itself out of someone's torso. Spoiler if you haven't seen it. It was horrific, and I'm laughing. And this couple is like looking over, like, what the hell's wrong with this kid? And like, and I wasn't laughing because it was funny. I just literally had no vocabulary to say how freaking scared I was of what that was. And so I think that really scarred me in a hopefully a good way. But I mean, you can even see. I mean, I even my family like collects stuff and gives things to me now
Oh,
because they
nice.
know my love of this, and half my stuff is still from that franchise. But that and Giger's artwork and everything about sci-fi and horror mixing together, I thought was great. Then years later came along like The Thing, and like that's why I passed that along to my daughter because that sense of horror and that slow burn, and then just early John Carpenter stuff was just so brilliant. And then films like The Shining too, because Kubrick, I think in terms of what he was creating as a filmmaker was designed for the large screen. Like
Yeah.
if you look at a movie like, I don't know, pick a big giant blockbuster, Avengers or Lord of the Rings, like they were never designed for your cell phone because like why would you do a battle scene with 10,000 orcs, battle it's like you wouldn't spend all that money and time on sound and visual effects to do something that is going to be on a 8-inch screen or something like that. So Kubrick was like one of the first directors that I think really genuinely understood the real estate and to tell a story of that depth, especially in the horror genre, designed for a 40-foot screen, and the slow burn, because you can't just watch The Shining on your phone or even stream it with any distractions. It's the kind of movie that you have to be in it for the long haul and the slow burn. And I think they did a great job with like Doctor Sleep and going back into that world and revisiting that was really cool. And so I have a special place in my heart for stuff like that. But even though they're not as graphically gruesome as some of the other films that I still like right now, and obviously, like you said, like, It and some of these other, more recent films that have gotten into that same space, those are the foundational ones that I think that kind of set me in the path of a combination of maybe sci-fi and thrillers and horror, and then evolving into, the kind of work that I do today.
Let me just throw it out to the rest of them. Ken?
What, horror?
Yeah.
You
go last.
Okay, three is 7 because I like the psychological thing. I have to agree with Chris. Fly is number 2.
Yeah.
And number one is The Room, because that was the scariest thing I had to sit through with Tommy Wiseau.
Oh, jeez.
That is my opinion, folks.
Completely agree. Now everybody knows here at Nerd Initiative, I'm not the biggest horror guy, but I do have a few in my pocket. Absolutely, Goldblum's The Fly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Nice.
A Clockwork Orange.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay.
And Kubrick is amazing. Yeah.
Yep. Honest to God, and I watched that when I was 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have such an appreciation for it. And Return to Oz, the Disney one.
Oh, that is nightmare fuel.
But like if you're talking about killer clouds of outer space, when you're a little kid, you see that like,
Yeah, that leaves an impression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was our childhood, though, for those of us who are a little older. I mean, we had that. We had Willy Wonka. That's got some nightmare fuel in it. The Witches, nightmare fuel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think about it, Gremlins is also
I had nightmares
Christmas
as
a Christmas horror film that was budgeted as a family film. But we could do a whole subgenre thing, and I can tell you and break down. I'm a huge horror fan.
Yeah.
But I will say this, as far as I'll just go by impactful ones. So I think that in no particular order, Jaws is probably the greatest, one of the greatest movies ever made. Plus, it is a horror film through and through. And then off of that, if you're talking modern horror, there is no modern horror without Black Christmas, the original 1974 version of Black Christmas. There is no modern horror at all without that. But then the thing that perfected horror would be Halloween, the original Halloween. But on top of that, if you get into it, I think I just got to see Alien last year on the big screen because they had the 45th anniversary of the movie.
Is it?
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it was phenomenal, and it still stood up. And thankfully, I didn't get to see like one of those crisp, cleaned up versions. They actually played an original version of it. So that was really awesome, and that movie still stands the test of time. The Thing stands the test of time. A lot of great stuff. You could go down the list of great, even creators. John Carpenter is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time.
A little nerd tangent on Alien is that years ago when they were before Blu-rays and DVDs, you had laser discs, and a big deal was like Criterion collections where they would get a lot of footage and put it on as bonus material. And I was so affected by Alien as a kid. And when I was working at one of the game companies, a guy had this Criterion version of Alien, and on it were all these deleted scenes that I had read about, and I'd read in the story, and I'd heard about them. And there was an old magazine called Starlog you used to be able to read, and they'd tell you about all this stuff, but you never knew it existed until you get the Laserdisc. And they had 2 scenes in particular of that film, and there's a scene where Dallas, who is the captain who gets taken away, you never see what happens to him, and another guy, Kane, earlier in the story, and both these guys get abducted by the alien, but you just never see what happens. And in the end of the original cut of the film, there's a scene where Ripley, Sigourney Weaver's character, is escaping the ship, and she finds them, and they've been cocooned. And I always heard about it. And Kane is like becoming like this egg, and Dallas is still alive, and he's begging her to kill him. And it's just like this horrific, terrible, gruesome, just and psychologically messed up scene. And there's also some backstory between those 2 characters, and she has to like burn him alive with this like flamethrower. And when I saw that scene, even though it wasn't finished and it wasn't part of the cut and didn't have all the music and all the sound design, but just that visceral scene, it took me back to being 10 years old again. And I had that experience all over again. And it was like weird how your brain gets set when you're a kid, with especially psychological horror or any of these kind of movies where you kind of have this impression as a kid, and then as an adult, it just immediately brings you back there. And I think that's what we're all going for in horror to some extent, is that childlike fear of just, turning off the lights and just thinking about, some boogeyman's going to get you. And I think that's kind of why we continue to pursue that as adults.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to see a lot of that when you pick up this book on Kickstarter. Like we said, we can't emphasize enough. April 8th is the cutoff date, but you don't want to wait that long to get Frost Road in your collection. After this, I believe San Diego Comic-Con, we're going to hear the lineup of what's coming next from PCB.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Good stuff.
All right, so we're definitely.
So,
Oh, go. I'm sorry.
I'll just give you a little tease. So basically, we'll be at San Diego Comic-Con for that whole week. If you guys are there, please come and see us, and we'd love to, have you and talk to you and help you guys out. But so I believe Wednesday or Thursday through Friday, it'll be Frost Road, where we're basically finishing it up, sending all the fulfillment out, kind of, putting a nice little end to it all. But then on Saturday, we're flipping it over and we're going to be announcing the second thing, and it's going to be completely different. So, what Frost Road is for this is kind of apocalyptic horror. This next book, it'll have some
Completely
similar notes, but it'll be completely different.
So we're not like doing a magical girl story or anything,
Never know.
You never know.
We're booth 4039. So we already have our booth set up, and it will be in the studio section, which is pretty cool. So we'll be the only creators in the studio section this year.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
So definitely, if you're at San Diego Comic-Con, make sure to swing by and talk to them about Frost Road and what they got coming out. And if we do not make it out there, because we're still trying to work out travel and
Logistics.
lodging and all that fun stuff, we're definitely going to have you guys back on the show, because we definitely want to hear more about what you're doing at PCB. And this is all based off Frost Road, which we can't emphasize enough. Get on the Kickstarter, sign up for it if you like horror, you like psychological thrills, you like great Kickstarter campaigns, because the stretch goals are right there. Plus the mentoring, like this is all one-stop shop here.
I was just going to add, if you like phenomenal art,
Yes.
like if you are somebody, like let's say that the horror scares you and you don't want to go near it. If you want a piece that just looks amazing on your coffee table, I know you used that as an example earlier, this is the book. Quite honestly, I was blown away by the art.
Yeah.
What they said.
I mean, we could sit here and rave about it, but we can't emphasize enough. Get on the Kickstarter right now when you hear this episode, or watch it on YouTube, however you're consuming this content. Make sure to look in the liner notes. We have the links all up there so you can go get your copy early. Don't wait till the last day. Get it early so you do not miss out on this. Keith, Chris, thank you again for coming on. We'll definitely talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. On behalf of Tom and Rich and myself, we'll end it how we do on Turn a Page every time, but we got to do a little twist, because when you're at the comic shop and you have a great issue in your hand that you bought off Kickstarter called Frost Road, and you see somebody struggling to find something, hand yours off to them. Tell them turn a page. We'll see you next time.
I'm out.